On your Tuesday episode of Locked On Raptors, the most Raptors-y prospect to ever prospect is rising up the draft boards. Will the Raptors be the ones to land him at 13? Or could his rise actually help them get a player who will fit what they need? We'll get into all that on today's episode of the show. Thanks for hanging.
You are Locked On Raptors, your daily Toronto Raptors podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's going on? And welcome to another episode of Locked On Raptors, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am your host, Sean Woodley. I've been covering the Toronto Raptors now for 9 seasons on various platforms. You can find all my work over on Twitter at Woodley Sean. You can follow the show on Instagram at Locked On Raptors, and you can join the growing Locked On Raptors Discord community. It's free to do. All you got to do is go to the link in the description, download the Discord app, I suppose, as well. You can do it on a browser, and come hang out. It's a really wonderful time. We're talking about all the different off-season machinations for the Raptors, stray thoughts about very silly band names. That's like just a sample of the last 24 hours in the Locked On Raptors Discord. Come hang out. It's super fun, super friendly, and we'd love to have you in there. So thanks in advance for joining. You can also go and support the show by subscribing, following, rating, reviewing for free on your favorite podcast apps, and of course on YouTube to get the video feed of the show each and every day. And today's show is brought to you by our pals over at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, on today's show, we continue with our individual player draft deep dives, looking today at Bilal Coulibaly, who of course is the teammate of Victor Wembanyama over with Metropolitans 92 in France, and by virtue of playing next to Victor Wembanyama, who every scout in the world has been watching all season long, it seems as though there's a bit of a rise happening for Coulibaly right now up draft boards, and it could very much impact the Raptors, not just because the Raptors could very well take him. As I mentioned off the top, he's like the Raptors-iest prospect ever, which I don't think actually excites me, considering the current situation of the team, but we'll examine why that is. But even if the Raptors don't end up being the team to take Coulibaly, he could be someone who knocks a couple guys down towards the Raptors' range in the lottery, which could be helpful as well. We'll get into all that. Just a quick update on the coaching talk, which we had yesterday, of course. It turns out it doesn't seem like maybe Yordi Fernandez is actually part of the final conversation. Doug Smith reporting that he was not brought back for a final interview this week. Of course, the Sacramento Kings assistant coach. Shout out to the listener in the comments who dutifully noted that we've been pronouncing Yordi Fernandez's name incorrectly. I truthfully had never heard it said out loud before. I was just going off of what was on the page. Yordi Fernandez. That's, just apologies to Yordi Fernandez and to everyone who's offended by my mispronunciations. Either way, doesn't seem like we're going to have that problem anyway. You know, always a chance the Raptors could circle back. I wouldn't mind if they did, because I think Fernandez was kind of top of my list as far as favorite potential candidates, but per Doug Smith at the Toronto Star yesterday, he's not part of that final group. It seems as though the Vegas odds are tilting towards Kenny Atkinson and Sergio Scariolo. Darko Rajakovic still in there as well, but we'll see. I don't have the energy to dive more into the coach talk, honestly, right now. Let's just wait and see who the dude is, then we'll react as such when that happens, hopefully by the end of the week. So let's pivot now back into draft stuff and get into a prospect who I understand the hype completely on. And part of me is like, maybe the Raptors should just take him. I like this kind of player quite a bit, but ultimately it would be, I think, a bit of a muddling decision for the Raptors as far as what it means for their future going forward. And honestly, just kind of like a missed opportunity to get some help in the door to affect a position of need that the Raptors badly need, which is shooting and guard play. Shooting and guard play, shooting and guard play. We've said it a million times. The tail of the tape on Metropolitan 92 wing, Bilal Coulibaly he's a 6'7", 6'8" wing. Measurements vary, but 6'7", 6'8" is pretty safe. He, again, has been teammates with Victor Wembanyama this season. Won't be 19 until a month after the draft, so one of, if not the youngest players in this year's class. And as we talked about a few weeks ago with Rafael Barlowe, we'll actually play a clip from that conversation about Coulibaly later in the show. But it's been a pretty meteoric rise here for the Frenchman, as you know, he kind of was originally slated as like a 2024 draft guy before really making an ascension in the back part of this season over in France. What basically happened over there is Metropolitans, which, you know, very good team, one of the better teams in France. They're in the final now. They just took down Asvel, which is, you know, what, like the sort of most famous and successful franchise in French basketball. They will be going to the finals, and Coulibaly was a big part of that. We'll get into that a little bit, but it's the second half of the season is where Bilal Coulibaly has really risen up, because injuries on that French team kind of thrust him into action, and he wasn't getting a ton of run early. You know, these leagues over in Europe, they're not just handing out minutes to young players. It takes a pretty special young player to grab a consistent role. The fact that Coulibaly is 18 years old and is impacting winning at a very high level in the French league is certainly very encouraging. But it has been sort of a late season meteoric rise up the draft boards, you know, to the point now where Rafael Barlowe has him going in the top 10. You know, lots of other folks kind of projecting him to go higher up. The Thunder at number 12 seem to be kind of a sweet spot as well. Actually, I think Rafael technically has him at 12 in his most recent mock draft on NBA Big Board. I think he has him higher on his actual player board. Right now, Kevin O'Connor has him going 15th to the Atlanta Hawks, but all the word is that there seems to be a bit of buzz around him rising up. The Utah Jazz at 9 are being mentioned as a potential suitor for him, with their thinking that there could still be a point guard available at 16, which is where the Raptors kind of come in, which we'll get to a little bit later on. As far as like the style of player Coulibaly is, like, look, again, I totally get it. I get why he would be somewhat of interest to specifically the Toronto Raptors. He does a lot of very Raptors-y things. He's also very raw. His three-point shot is untested and unproven. Again, all of these check boxes that the Raptors tend to love to go for. And he profiles as the type of guy who personally, just kind of with my own personal flavor of what I like to watch in basketball, he seems like the type of dude who I would really enjoy watching the development of. So if the Raptors do go ahead and take him at 13, I won't think it's the right pick necessarily. It's also totally possible I'm wrong, because we're all wrong about the draft all the time. But, you know, even if it's not the right pick that I would have made, I'll still enjoy the experience of watching him kind of get into the league and get his feet wet, because I think there's a lot to like here. That said, considering the state of the roster, I just don't think they can make a pick like this at 13 if Coulibaly is there. I think they have just such a surplus right now of one type of player by design, and I think that design is faulty in its sort of imagination. And they just have such a notable lack of extremely important skills in the shooting and guard play department at a range in the draft that is rich in shooting and guard play. Look, to not take advantage of that, I don't think I'd call it like unforgivable, because that's really strong language to have about the 13th pick in the draft, and it's every possibility that the pick ends up being the right pick down the line. But for me, it just feels like it'd be a missed opportunity to grab a player who brings skills that are unique to the Raptors roster, that are not found elsewhere. The other thing, too, is if you're looking at sort of projections of what Coulibaly could be, if all goes right, if his development goes along perfectly, I feel like his like 80th or 90th percentile outcome is probably something very close to OG Anunoby. You know, flirt with 20 a game, play really well off the ball, compete for all defense teams. Like, that's the type of thing. If things go really well here for Coulibaly, that's like the upper tier of his outcomes. You know, OG Anunoby has hit a high upper range of his outcomes as a 22nd overall pick, whatever he was. 23rd? I can't remember. Thing is, you already have OG Anunoby on the team. And, you know, I guess your mileage may vary as to whether you think the Raptors will keep him. I think their track record suggests they'd like to take care of their guys. Masai Ujiri has once said he would build a whole team out of OG Anunobys if he could. I think the Raptors are going to be inclined to want to keep OG. And I think his play down the stretch really hints at, okay, this guy fits whatever the Raptors are going to do with Scotty Barnes going forward. All the other questions aside, OG is a clear fit. If Jakob Poeltl's on the team, he played so wonderfully off of him as well. And so if you feel like you've got a surefire chance of keeping OG here, which the Raptors' internal, brain trust would know more than I would or any of us would, how likely that might be after agent conversations, extension talks likely coming this summer, etc. Drafting someone like Coulibaly, who's going to be blocked at that position, presumably for the next 5 years if you keep OG. It's not to say you can't have multiple really good defensively versatile wings, but the Raptors already have that. And so I just think they need to diversify the skill set they have on their roster more than anything else. And so unless you're really looking at OG as someone, A, you're going to trade this summer, or B, that you're worried is going to be a flight risk after next year, and you're looking for the replacement for him, then Coulibaly makes some sense. That said, there's no way Coulibaly becomes as good as OG is for the next 5 years. Like, that's just not how this goes. He's 18 years old. It's going to take some time. And so with all that said, I don't think this is the pick for the Raptors at 13, but I would totally be unsurprised and unmoved if the Raptors actually did it, because he ticks so many boxes that the Raptors typically love. Will it change with a new coach, with Nick Nurse not being in there? I think the coach's influence on the draft is probably often overstated, so maybe it doesn't really matter, and we're kind of just going with what the philosophy of the front office is here, in which case Coulibaly makes a ton of sense. But we'll get into the strengths, the weaknesses of his game in just a second here. We'll also get into that clip from Rafael, his appearance on here, kind of detailing the reasons behind his meteoric rise up draft boards, and get into the concept of, will he even be there at 13 for the Raptors? And if he's not, does it actually help them? We'll get into that in one moment. Before we dive in there, however, gotta tell you about our good pals over at Game Time, who have made buying tickets for sporting events so easy. It should have been easy all along, I'm telling you. It should not be a stressful thing to go and try to buy tickets for a sporting event, but lo and behold, it is. You're worried about getting the right price. You're comparing on different apps and realizing, oh my God, it's this much over on this app, this much on this app, but the fees on this one are too much. No, Game Time cuts all that out because they have a Game Time guarantee, which means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. There is no downside to using Game Time to buy the tickets for your next event, whether it is football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. It's all there for you. You get images of your seat before you buy, so you know exactly what to expect as well. My wife and I are going to be doing this. I'm going to Seattle and Vancouver Island in August. We're going to Seattle to see a baseball game, and we're going to buy our tickets on Game Time, because why wouldn't we? We get that lowest price guarantee. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, we continue on here with your first listen of the day. Thanks to the everyday listeners of the show for tuning in. If you are an everydayer, let us know in the comments. We very much appreciate your patronage of the podcast, your support. You're all wonderful people who are my best friend. All right, let's dive on in now to the strengths and weaknesses as it stands for the constantly evolving and very young and very moldable still Bilal Coulibaly, again, the 6'8" wing from over in France, teammates with Victor Wembanyama. The big thing here is the defense, right? Like, he's massive. He's got like a 7'2" wingspan. He's versatile. He's strong. He's bouncy. He's got extreme hops, promising, kind of in every element of defense. And again, watching him play defense, it does, like, I understand the OG Anunoby comparisons. I hate player comparisons because they run against the sort of general thing that I like the most about basketball, which is that every player is unique and has their own style and brand. And so I don't love player comparisons, but you can see the little kernels of OG Anunoby in the way Bilal Coulibaly plays, especially like the way he moves defensively. It's very graceful. It's very like effortless. OG, I think, maybe kind of has a little bit more of like a bruising reputation, but the way that OG kind of handles ball handlers, smaller ball handlers in particular, that's where I kind of see the most Coulibaly is just like, he's beautiful in the way he kind of has the footwork, the arms, like not really getting out of position, the way he can kind of get back on his back foot, then lurch forward to contest a shot. Like, that stuff is sort of the movement that you're looking at with Coulibaly, which is very exciting. Also in line with the OG comparison is his play as an off-ball scorer. Really good cutter, can get moving to the rim the way that we saw OG do so wonderfully. I mean, he's done it his whole career, but I think down the stretch with Jakob Poeltl there throwing him passes, that was kind of the peak of the OG off-ball experience. And he's good at scoring within the three-point arc as well. 61% on twos, can absolutely finish at the rim, can finish through contact. And, that's where the Raptors are going to have to live as a team as long as they don't have shooting. And if they're not going to draft shooting with their 13th pick, it seems their long-term resistance to having shooting on the team might continue. And so that rim scoring will be super helpful, and he should play well off of Scotty Barnes, off of Jakob Poeltl, off of Pascal Siakam. He's not going to be a type of guy who comes in and needs the ball a ton. Not that he'll play with the starters all that much anyway, probably out of the gate. But that's the sort of book on his offense. The off-ball stuff right now is pretty good. Another sort of comparison that comes to mind, again, I don't like this, not a like for like comp, and it would take a lot for Coulibaly to become this player. But he kind of reminds me of the way Aaron Gordon kind of completes the picture for the Nuggets, the way he moves off the ball, can shoot threes. And I think that's a pretty high-end type of outcome here for Coulibaly as well. Again, these are all high-end. Everything goes right. This is where this guy ends up. I think the mere fact that he's succeeding right now in a high-level European league is not nothing. It's not like the Spanish ACB, but the French league is very good, and he's been crucial in helping Metz advance to the final of that league. That seems valuable and important to me. Like, this was, again, I don't want to make comparisons to players, but this is how my brain works. But like, this was why Luka Doncic felt like such a no-brainer to anybody who wasn't the Suns or the Kings on draft night, or I guess the Hawks. And it's that, like, he just dominated in Europe at 18 years old. It's not easy to do. These guys are not getting free passes on minutes. They have to earn them and then keep those minutes, because there's grown-ass men playing over in these leagues that are always fighting for those minutes. There's former college stars and NBA, fringe guys and everything. These are grown men leagues. And so for Coulibaly to be succeeding the way he is and really kind of hitting his stride, the crescendo of his season during this playoff run for Metropolitans, like that's really encouraging. I think he also seems to really understand his offensive limitations from the film you watch. Shout out again to Hardwood Hoop Central for their 2.5 hour smash cuts of highlights. Super fun to watch just to kind of get a good feel of a player. And Coulibaly seems to not commandeer the offense necessarily. He'll just all right, ball swung to me, I'm going to go make the right play. Thing is, he's got to make the easy play, because he doesn't have an expansive bag when it comes to attacking closeouts and making things happen on the drive, which we'll get to. But I do think overall, considering the success we've seen a guy like OG have playing off of Jakob Poeltl, considering the way Scotty Barnes passes, I think the fit for Coulibaly would be quite nice with the Raptors if they were to take him. Obviously not right away. He's not going to be someone who comes in next year and is putting up 15 a game for you. He's going to be one of the youngest players in the league. It's going to take him some time, but still encouraging stuff. A lot of it. It's a really intriguing package from Coulibaly. You get to the concerns, and this is where my interest kind of drops off, because I badly think the Raptors need to go for shooting and or guard play with this pick. I've been banging the drum the entire draft lead up. They need to get some shooting and some guard play. If you can get both in one player, incredible. Coulibaly doesn't really offer either of those things. The three-point shot is not terrible. He shot about 34% this season on 114 total attempts across his competitions. It's tough to track. Again, he kind of didn't have a ton of rotation time early on. It's all very small sample stuff. Small volume, only 40-something games, if that. And so it's a little bit hard to pin down what his actual shooting is going to look like. That said, 71% from the line across competitions. It's up. He was at 58%, I believe, the season prior in his play across all competitions. So a nice increase from the line. But 71% is not incredible. It's not the sort of number you look at and say, oh, that guy projects as a no-brainer knockdown shooter. You get someone with an 85, 90% free throw percentage. You're thinking, okay, they've got the touch to go and shoot threes at a pretty high level in the NBA. Remains to be seen. There's been some improvement there for Coulibaly for sure, but it's not a surefire thing that he's going to be a knockdown guy. That said, we said the same thing about OG Anunoby, and look at him. So there's that. I think the biggest sort of red flag for me with Coulibaly's game is that he just doesn't really seem to have great feel setting up others when he drives. And when he drives, it can honestly kind of look like he's wearing roller skates that are on backwards. He's this graceful player moving in the open court, off the ball, all this, and then he gets the ball on attacking a closeout, and it's just like, okay, he's got no plan here. It's like Patrick Patterson stuff. Just like, all right, I have the ball, I got to do something, but where's this going? Who's to say? Danny Green also comes to mind for his attacking of closeouts. And look, maybe that's not so much of a problem on a Raptors team that in the post-Nick Nurse era, you would think is going to go with hopefully a more structured offense. As we kind of talked about yesterday, the European influences they seem to be kind of leaning towards. Kenny Atkinson as well, sort of has been part of really sort of beautiful, sophisticated offenses that aren't just predicated on read and react and guys making stuff happen with the ball. And so perhaps a little more structure to amplify the strengths of Coulibaly and not sort of put him in position where he's forced to make decisions because that's just the way the offense flows. Maybe that's a way to sort of cut that part out of his game until it's more developed. But either way, you're an NBA player. You're standing and shooting threes. You're going to have to learn to attack a closeout at some point. And right now, that's not really a thing that Coulibaly offers. At the same time, there are flashes, and he'll have some drives where it's really beautiful and graceful. He'll go up, he'll finish through contact, he'll have these sort of tough off-balance finishes. He'll even throw the odd, beautiful kick-out pass when the defense slides over to wall him off. There's some stuff there. There's pops within the sort of 2.5-hour smash cut of all the film where it's like, oh, if you can do that more, then this is a different conversation. But to me, it is a very raw offensive game, and the Raptors have a million players of this size, of this sort of build and mold. It's what they're hoping Precious Achiuwa can become, and he's like their fourth best player of this ilk. Fifth best, maybe? I don't know. And so adding another guy who kind of adds to the clutter, maybe there's a trade that's forthcoming that's going to remove some of that clutter and make it so there's more of a pathway for Coulibaly, but I'm not super into the idea of adding more to the long projectable offense light wings that the Raptors already have in the door. And so for me, that's why I end up kind of hoping that he's probably taken before the Raptors, honestly, to take the decision out of their hands. Because truthfully, if I'm the Raptors and he falls there to 13 and I'm sitting there looking at him versus some guard, I totally get why they would be compelled to want to go for Coulibaly here. There's a lot to like. I really hope that instead he goes a little higher in the draft and the Raptors can just get someone who addresses what they badly need on this roster. And it's not even just that it's a need right now. It's going to be a need long term. Shooting don't go out of style. Guard play don't go out of style. And having those things to complement Scotty Barnes, who doesn't shoot a ton right now, to complement Jakob Poeltl, who if you retain him is going to be a non-shooting center. I would like someone who projects as a longer term better fit next to those guys. As much as I still think there's a world in which Coulibaly fits on this team, I think a guard shooter type, Kobe Bufkin continues to come to mind as my favorite guy in this range. That's kind of what I'd like to see a little bit more from the Raptors here. And so as much as I'm very understanding of the rise Coulibaly is going through right now in the draft, sphere, probably not for me if I'm the Raptors drafting at 13. We'll get into, on the other side, a quick clip from an episode of the podcast from a few weeks back. The everydayers will have already heard it, but if you haven't heard it, Rafael Barlowe was on the show kind of digging into the reasons why Bilal Coulibaly is as Raptors-y as a potential draft pick as they get, and the reasons kind of why he's gone through this meteoric rise. We will also get into where he kind of ranks on my personal big board of what I'd like to see the Raptors do at number 13. Before we get into that, however, got to tell you about our good buddies over at Prize Picks, which has made daily fantasy sports super fun, super easy, very accessible, and, again, most importantly, fun. Most of the time when I've dabbled in daily fantasy, you just like, it's not super enjoyable. This isn't a great user interface. Maybe I'm up against some weird sort of projection system where it's me against some other team that some experts put together. Not what I want to be doing. At Prize Picks, all you got to do is pick 2 to 6 players and whether they will get more or less than their projection for a given stat in the given game that night. And if you get all 6 right, you can win up to 25 times your money on any entry. And it's not just basketball. You can go literally any sport under the sun. If it's on television somewhere in the world, you can have it be part of your Prize Picks entry, whether it's basketball, football, the soccer, the WNBA, you got NASCAR, tennis, MMA, boxing, Euro, basketball, cricket, women's hockey. It's all in there. Go check it out. And entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. Super easy to use, and you get safe and fast withdrawals. And they're currently operational in over 30 states and in Canada, except for Ontario at the moment. Every other province, though, you're good to go. Download the Prize Picks app or go to prizepicks.com. Sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code Locked On. If you deposit $100, Prize Picks will give you $100. If you deposit $50, Prize Picks will give you $50. They're just going to match whatever you put in. So go put in that hundo, and they will match it with $100 when you use the promo code Locked On at sign up for an instant deposit match up to that $100. Go check them out at Prize Picks. All right, rounding out the show here, Sean Woodley along. You know that. This is far into the show for you to not know my name. Either way, we're going to finish off our chat here about Bilal Coulibaly. I want to play a clip from a recent episode of Locked On Raptors where we had Rafael Barlowe, our pal from Locked On NBA Big Board. Go subscribe to his Substack, by the way. It's fantastic. Cannot recommend it enough if you're looking for draft stuff. Also listening to Locked On NBA Big Board. He talked about Bilal Coulibaly today, so go check it out. But here is Rafael from a few weeks back digging into why Bilal Coulibaly strikes him as a particularly Raptors-y pick.
I would say Bilal Coulibaly, Victor Wembanyama's teammate in France. And he's someone that I watched last January at a game in France. They have this called the Espoirs League, and it's like an under-21 league. It's almost like the JV basketball. Like the senior team plays at the games start late over there, but the senior team plays at 8 o'clock, and the under-21 league is at like 5 o'clock. It's like a high school game. And I was at a game, and I saw Bilal play last year, and I thought, okay, wow, he's showing some stuff. I mean, he was long, athletic. He looked really, really young. And I thought, okay, well, this is a guy 2 years from now, he could be someone that's on NBA radars. Fast forward to last summer, he had a pretty good summer with the French national team, the under-18 team. Not crazy numbers. I want to say he averaged about 7 points a game, but he just showed like major improvement. Fast forward again, I go to Paris in late September, and I watch him at the under-21 league, and he's a totally different player. He looks more confident. He's longer. His athleticism seems better. He's blocking three-pointers. He's finishing in transition. And now I'm like, okay, you know what? 2024. This is someone to pay attention to as a first-round pick. So they had the Wembanyama Scoot Showcase in Vegas. He played a little bit of minutes here and there. Looked absolutely lost. People probably don't even remember him getting in the game. Then he starts to play well. There's some injuries, and now he's forced to play with the senior team. And he had multiple games of double figures. He's cutting. He's finishing, filling the lane in transition. But he is just a smooth, coordinated, fluid athlete, 7'2" wingspan, 6'2", and his trajectory and how much he's improved over the last 12 months makes him really intriguing. And I'm friends with his agent, and I guess maybe like the last 2 months, I'm like, hey, is Bilal coming out? He's like, I don't know. He's like, it's tough because 2024 is considered a weak class, and I think if he stays in Europe, then he can develop into a lottery pick for 2024. But then he just keeps having these double-figure games. And, of course, the whole scouting world is watching Wembanyama, but you can't help but notice that Bilal is playing a major role on the team that is either in first or second place, give or take a game or two. And he's playing well. And so he's actually shooting the ball a lot better than people expected. I know according to Synergy, and, their stats may be a little bit off, but he was shooting 43% from three, and he's just been efficient all over except at the free throw line. And so I've had a friend tell me that's an agent, and what he said to me, he said about a year ago, made sense. He was like, most general managers or decision makers are going to go with the consensus, because if that player doesn't pan out, then every other general manager would have made the same mistake. And they said there's only a few, and Masai was the name he mentioned, that has the guts to take a chance on a guy that is against the consensus and is not afraid to fail that if that guy doesn't pan out. So with that being said, Bilal is a Toronto Raptors pick all the way.
Yeah, the Raptors are taking Bilal Coulibaly if he's there, aren't they? It's just happening. Thanks again to Rafael. We'll have him on again, hopefully in the next couple weeks here before the draft. But yeah, the idea of Masai kind of having the security, obviously, I feel like that's maybe a little bit more tenuous now than it was maybe a year ago. I also don't think Masai Ujiri is anywhere close to getting moved on from by the Toronto Raptors. And so, yeah, he is the kind of guy who has the history of not going with consensus, of going with the player he thinks is going to become the best. And a lot of the time it works out. Scotty Barnes, a wonderful example of this. Pascal Siakam, like nobody had heard of this dude at 27. I was still clamoring for Deontay Davis when he gets picked at 27. The Raptors don't care what the consensus is. They will take their internal knowledge and go with it. That said, I just, this one, considering the state of the Raptors right now, considering what they need on this roster, it feels like it would be like a little bit too much of like a heat check on this type of player for the Raptors to go with Coulibaly. And look, there's a very little chance that he's going to be there at 13 at this point, considering how things are tracking. I mentioned the Jazz have been thrown around by Rafael and his reporting as a team who might be in on Coulibaly at 9, thinking they can snag a point guard at 16 when they draft again. The Thunder love to draft themselves a project, especially a project at a position where they don't really have one right now, right? Yes, they have Jalen Williams. He's more of a backcourt partner, it seems, for Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. You throw Coulibaly in there as the 3 alongside your Chet Holmgrens and, whoever else. They have other good players on that team too, and I hate it. That team could be a problem, and maybe they go for Coulibaly there as someone to help make them more of a problem down the line as they continue the slow play with this thing. With that said, if he does go ahead of the Raptors, this benefits the Raptors as far as like my own personal, wants and needs for the Raptors. And that if the Jazz don't take a guard at 9, that is one other guard who's going to be available on the board, presumably when the Raptors pick. The Magic are at 11. They could go guard for sure, but also they love to draft long dudes who don't shoot. They're like proto-Raptors when it comes to that. Maybe even like a more successful version of the Raptors when it comes to that. If you go like grand scheme of things, I don't know. That's a debate for another day. That probably not. They keep on being really bad every year. But either way, like they could totally go for a guard there. They also have Markelle Fultz and Cole Anthony. Maybe they just want to roll those guys. Maybe they want to go sign Fred VanVleet. Maybe they don't want to guard at all. And they are, sort of going at a different position here. Grady Dick, I think, has been mocked to them at 11 quite a bit just because, boy, does that team need shooting, and Grady Dick brings shooting. And so, with that said, like, does this mean Cason Wallace is available for the Raptors at 13? Does this mean Kobe Buffkin's more likely to slip through to 13 and not slide? Does this mean Anthony Black, who we haven't talked about yet and will, ends up sliding? It's tough to say. There was also a report yesterday about Cason Wallace that he is no longer taking any more draft workouts. Apparently, he's only worked out with the Wizards, who pick 8th, and the Raptors at 13th. So maybe Cason Wallace is out of the cards if he's going to go 8 to Washington. Maybe there's a promise there. Who's to say? But either way, there's going to be one extra player who was projected to be in that top 13 who will not be if Bilal Coulibaly jumps up in there. And that could benefit the Raptors and just kind of make them more spoiled for choice at 13 when it comes to who they might take, whether it's Jordan Hawkins, Keontae George, obviously, my feelings are Kobe Buffkin's the dude, but it's tough. It's Coulibaly throws a wrench into the whole of draft night. He could go higher. He could go to the Raptors at 13 and, just kind of confuse an already confusing roster picture even more. He's certainly the kind of like the wild card who could flip the draft and make this a lot more interesting and a lot more sort of unpredictable when it comes to who will be there for the Raptors at 13 or who they take at 13. If he's there, he could totally be the guy. Like, just every box that the Raptors have historically gone for is ticked, it seems, by Bilal Coulibaly. So we'll leave it there. Let us know in the comments what you think about Coulibaly, where he kind of ranks for you. For me, I think at the moment, he's kind of on the level with Keontae George for me, which is like not my first choice, but if he's like the best guy there at 13, then I could totally be fine with it. I'm still, Kobe Buffkin is my number 1, Cason Wallace, Jordan Hawkins in that sort of next tier. Hawkins maybe skewing a little closer to the top of it just because of the shooting and the sort of pedigree that he brings. But, I don't think you'll be mad long-term with Bilal Coulibaly if he's drafted by the Raptors. They have a successful track record of developing this type of player. OG Anunoby being that successful track record, but also just guard play Please, just some guard play. All I just want to watch is a guard who can dribble and like handle the ball and run a pick and roll and make it so Fred VanVleet doesn't have to play 42 minutes a game just so you can have that skill on the floor somewhere. That's all I want. We'll leave it there. Thank you so much for tuning in. As we will continue with the draft stuff as we carry on through this week. We're going to talk about Anthony Black. We're going to talk about Nick Smith. We'll probably talk about Leonard Miller at some point. Lots of guys who could be part of the conversation for the Raptors at 13. It's a fun part of the draft for them to be in. I'm really enjoying. There's just like a lot of different ways they could go, and a lot of guys who present, I think, pretty big upgrades on skills that the Raptors badly lack right now. So we're not done with the draft stuff by any means. Go listen to the previous episodes. They're actually on a playlist if you want to go to the YouTube channel and just go to the playlist of all of our draft profiles. Kobe Buffkin, Cason Wallace, Jordan Hawkins, Keontae George, now Bilal Coulibaly. We got more guys coming up as well. But yeah, thanks so much for the support of the show. Please subscribe, follow, rate, review for free wherever you get your podcast. Join the Locked On Raptors Discord to keep the draft talk going. The link is in the description of the podcast. And we will be back again on Wednesday as we dive into, let's decide right now, shall we? Anthony Black. That's who we're talking about tomorrow. We'll get to it then. Thanks so much for tuning in. Bye-bye.